Ms. Meeta Rajivlochan is an IAS officer of the Maharashtra cadre with an interest in ideas and policies that will empower India. Currently, she is Member Secretary, National Commission for Women, Government of India. Her current role concerns facilitation of institutional mechanisms to provide support to women in distress and to work for the cause of women empowerment. We couldn't have had anyone better than her for this workshop today. During the COVID lockdowns, the NCW operated 24/7 helpline for women in distress and also for families in need of rescue and emergency supplies. The helpline became the lifeline for thousands of women in need at a time when the entire nation was undergoing an unprecedented crisis. It has been converted into a permanent mechanism now. She has also facilitated the launch of a 6-week online training program for women entrepreneurs in collaboration with Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. NCW also collaborates with India SME Forum, an association of over 80,000 businesses, to provide mentorship to women entrepreneurs. Given the enthusiastic response to these programs, IIM Bangalore has now launched a similar program in Hindi language for women entrepreneurs. IIMs at Kozhikode, Jammu and Shillong have also launched similar programs very recently. And Ms. Rajivlochan has also discharged senior management responsibilities in many positions in the past 32 years. It has been a stellar career for her. I'm not going to list all those responsibilities which she had, but you will get to hear from her soon. Yeah. She has published a number of articles dealing with matters of development and public policies in reputed journals like the Economic and Political Weekly, PLOS One, Current Medicine and Research, etc. She has authored books on farmers' suicide and on the role of community in management of water supply systems. Her latest book is titled Making India Great Again, Learning from Our History, and it has been published by Manohar Books in 2020. A new paperback edition has been released this year, and the book looks at the economic growth from a historical perspective and argues that learning and knowledge capital are key factors in growth and nation building. Further, it demonstrates that a healthy relationship between government and business is critical for economic growth. Ma'am, as I said, you have had a wonderful career and you have impacted thousands of lives. In fact, I would say millions of lives. So over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Nishad. Friends, in today's session, when I talk about women in leadership positions, I shall begin my talk talking about the difference between sex and gender. I think this is a very important distinction to be made. So when we talk about sex, we talk about the biological differences between the two sexes. Very often in our usage, we tend to confuse sex and gender. Biologically speaking, we see that there is no difference between men and women when it comes to aptitudes for participating in a scientific career. In fact, when we look at the numbers of women in STEM education, we find that India is much better than many other countries of the world, including European countries. So, the instance of women who enroll for STEM education is 34% in the United States, 38% in the United Kingdom. In India, it's 43%. So that says for a lot. Or even if you look at women in highly specialized careers like civil aviation, the International Society for Women Pilots estimates that in India, 12.5% pilots are women, and this is much more than 5.5% in the USA and 4.7% in the United Kingdom. So basically what these figures demonstrate to us is that women in India show no hesitation in opting for science careers. So there is no biological distinction in this respect, and also equally when we talk about leadership roles and leadership skills. I don't really think that there is any biological attribute which would make either a man or a woman more or less suited for a career in science. Very often I hear that, women biologically have a greater empathy for others. But forgive me, I have seen women in leadership positions, many of them show very little empathy for others. I have seen men in leadership positions who do. So I think that these are social distinctions which have much more to do with what we read in the Western media than they have to do with our lived experience. The basic attributes of a good leader, the ability to define clear goals, the ability to build teams, the ability to communicate clearly, the ability to build a large meta plan, and at the same time to be able to drill down into its micro components and to build robust reporting systems. These are all attributes of good leaders that we would find in both men and women in different permutations and combinations. So if this is the case, then how is it that we find women in fewer leadership positions in science? Because that too is an observed fact. So here I would like to speak about gender, which is very different from biological sex. Gender is socially defined. It depends upon social roles, how we look at ourselves and how we look at the other. And over there, very definitely, women's family role, their primary role in childbearing and in child rearing is very important. Professor Anant Ramakrishna spoke about it, and yes, it remains very, very true. So if we have very few women like Tessie Thomas, the missile woman, that is because at base we do not have enough numbers of women in science. It is nothing about that institutional discrimination against women. It's about our ability to build a strong ecosystem that would cater to the special needs of women. So what are those special needs? Those needs have to do with support systems. Now support systems could either be social in nature, familial in nature, or they could be institutional in nature. Social support systems would refer to what your own family and relatives are able to offer you. Now I myself have been in a job, a very demanding job for 32 years. So yes, very definitely I tell my husband a lot of the time that by you have to pitch in, and where children are concerned, and he did so very, very enthusiastically. So there were many years when I was simply not around, and he took care of the children. I have 2 children, he brought them up. But the thing is that when we talk about society in general, there we cannot talk about such localized familial relationships. We have to talk about institutional systems. In general, of course, I do believe that for good family support, women have to be sure of their self-worth, they have to be sure of their value, and they have to demand that their families stand behind them. But institutional support systems are very different. Institutional support systems would provide creches that would allow married women who are in jobs to take better care of their children. It would provide them safe transport. It would provide them a safe ecosystem in which they can live and they can thrive. It is this that we need to build more and more in India. And recently, when we look back at the experience of the pandemic, there we see how important institutional support systems are. So where women were able to find support by their family, they were able to hold on to their jobs. And if they were not able to find that kind of social support, then they had to leave their jobs. So this tells us how important it is to build that. Over here, however, when we talk about institutional support systems, I would like a little bit to refer to some of the things that Elsa Marie de Silva said in the inaugural session. In the inaugural session, Elsa Marie de Silva talked about a very unsafe India. She talked about a rape culture, and she said that 1 in 3 women are assaulted sexually, and she said it's a global figure. Friends, I would like to tell all of you are independent women, you are trained in logic, scientific thinking. Please look at the data around you. Do not take such statements at face value. What happens in the rest of the globe doesn't have anything to do with you. Where I would ask people like Elsa Marie de Silva, where is the data to support whatever generalizations she made? And when you look around you, you find that the data is diametrically different from the very sad picture that she painted. We have the report of the National Family Health Survey, the 5th edition. This is a survey that has been conducted. It's a sample household survey that surveys physically 6 lakh women in India across ages, across income groups, across families, across the country. The survey has been conducted every 5 years for the past 3 decades now. So the data is available across space and it is available across time. Please go and look at it. There's a whole site called NFHS India. That data survey shows very clearly that when it comes to sexual violence, 6% women in India reported sexual violence of any kind, and 85% of the perpetrators were either current or former husbands. So this is a very different picture from the kind of picture that Elsa Marie da Silva painted. When you look at India, it is not stranger violence or sexual violence which is the major threat. It is domestic violence. No doubt in India, domestic violence is an issue. 1 in 3 women do report about domestic abuse. But there the issue is of our cultural mores. The National Family Health Survey also tells you that women actually don't find that domestic violence is anything to object to, and 1 in 2 women thought that this was nothing to object to. So this has to do with our socialization, this has to do with the kind of education that we get in our schools and colleges. It doesn't say that we have a predatory culture, and in fact I think it is very important to call out people like Marie de Silva, because what she was saying, she for instance talked about the Thomson Reuters survey which said that globally India is the most dangerous country for women in the world. Please go and look up that survey. Do you know how many women Thomson Reuters interviewed for that report? We'll come to that in the question answer session. Thomson Reuters interviewed all of 200 women in India. That's 200. So we have 60 crore women in this country, and Thomson Reuters interviewed all of 200, on the basis of which they produced a bullshit report. See, what I would like to suggest to all of you is that a lot of this reportage that is done, it's coming from the Western media. Now, the Western media and Western countries have been pushing this agenda for a long time to show India down. That is part of an economic competition. If you notice, it all began mostly after 2000, once Western countries began to realize that India is a serious competitor, much like China. But the point is that the Western press can push whatever agenda they have. It's a free country, bhai. They can print whatever they like. But what about Indians? You people are thinking women. How do you take in or absorb this kind of bullshit without even checking what is being said? Please go and read the data. For your information, the United States and United Kingdom don't even conduct surveys like the National Family Health Survey. There is no regular physical interview. If at all they conduct interviews, they conduct telephone interviews. So why don't we cross-question ourselves, our own lived experience? I'm very glad that Marie de Silva talked about evidence and she talked about lived experience. Look at your own lived experience. Look around you. Are you even able to relate to the kind of things she said? Now see, it is important what she said. Why is it important? It's important because it is in effect an attempt to colonize your minds. India is a country that has been subject to colonial rule for 200 years of our history. But now they left. Said they left 75 years ago. How can you allow yourself to be mentally colonized like this, accept whatever they are saying without subjecting any of it to any reasoned analysis or to any kind of evidence? And what she said and what many people like her say, you read about it in a lot of the press every day, is important. Why? Because it builds up an overall atmosphere that India is unsafe for women. These kinds of ideas are used by parents to tell their daughters, no, look at that report. See, that report says India is the most unsafe place for women. I will not let you go and attend school. I will not let you go and attend college. I will not let you go and do a job. So these are the kind of things which feed, and we absorb all these inputs which come from all sides. Our parents absorb these inputs. It is when I talk about an ecosystem that assures women of a safe life, well, that ecosystem also includes this kind of mental environment. What is the mindscape with which we functions? Friends, I've been in the National Commission of Women for 2.5 years now. In the last 3 decades, the National Commission for Women has worked with other stakeholders to ensure that women in India have equal rights, that they have the same rights as men do, and that they have the, whether it comes to education, whether it comes to health, whether it comes to running businesses, and we can see the impact of the change all around us. For the first time since 2047, we have more women in India than we have men. We have a positive gender ratio, and this is a very important thing. Historically, it has been seen that societies where societies are under stress, those are the societies that tend to produce more men than women. If today we have turned the corner, that says something about the quality of social life in India. In 2019, in the Lok Sabha election, for the first time, more women in India voted than did men. And we saw the difference when we, just 3-4 months ago, there was the Legislative Assembly election in UP. For the first time, we saw the press and women in the press, men and women, talking about how there is a constituency of women voters who do not necessarily share the ideas of their parents, their brothers and their sons. And politicians made serious attempts to reach out to women voters. Why would they do that if women did not have agency? All of you are intelligent women. Do you simply reproduce or regurgitate the ideas of your fathers? No, I'm sure you don't. Why don't? Then how is it that when I talk to other people, I talk to them, it is said that women have no agency? Have you seen it? Well, you know what is the kind of response that I get? The response that I get is, you know, madam, no, I don't do it, my friends don't do it, my parents don't do it, but you know, we are very educated people, we are socially very elite. There are other people. Other people practice this kind of discrimination. Who are these others? And if these others do exist, then how is it that 43% women in India enroll for STEM and others don't? Please use your brains. Please look at the evidence. Please don't allow the West to colonize you. If you look at the Constituent Assembly debates in 1950, when our constitution was being framed, they say again and again that freedom is the most important right. However much money you have, however wealthy you may or may not be, it is of no value if you are not free. Throw off these chains. Look around you. The subject for today's discussion is women in science, which Ms. De Silva, for best known reasons, didn't really talk about. Talk about women in science. There was a beautiful study that was done by the Niti Aayog in 2016 and 17. It's available on the website of the Niti Aayog. Please go and see it. They surveyed 1,000 women, and when they surveyed, I'd like to share some of the results of what they surveyed with you. When they surveyed those women, they found that 2/3, that is 2 out of 3 women, said that they had chosen research as a career because they wanted to. 68%, 2 out of 3 women said that this was their research career they had chosen because they had observed successful professionals. They had a desire to contribute professionally. Another 1/3 said that they had chosen this career because they were influenced by parents. So there were these 1,000 women in our major science establishments who were saying that they have observed others, their peers, and they had been positively influenced by what they had observed. This was the career of their choice. 80% of those women were married. 69% of them had children. And yes, it is true that marriage and family life does pose an issue, and it imposes commitments, family commitments that you had to deal with. So 18% did say that they reported a break in career. Most of it had to do with marriage, and it was either before or after the birth of their first child. But if this was the case, then surely it is up to us as active stakeholders to create a strong ecosystem where women can live and work. When they were asked, women were in the study were asked what was the reason for this particular job they had chosen. 63%, again 2 out of 3 said it was because of good workplace academic infrastructure. Another 17% said that it was of non-academic infrastructure. So it is these reasons that are the operational factors that women look at when they choose a career in science. And when we look at the 3 kinds of things which are very important to us having a supportive ecosystem, I talked about a creche, I talked about institutionalized transport, and I talked about housing. So let's see at what the women in this study said. When we talked about how affected they are by family commitments, then 1/3 said that they were affected either adversely or somewhat adversely. And there were another 42% who said कि no, they were not affected. So opinions vary, but 1/3 were affected by their family commitments. When they were asked about does the institution where they are employed provides family care, so a good 1/3, 39% said that yes, family support exists, it is provided by their institution and they utilize it. Another 25% said that while it does not exist, if it had existed, they would have used it. So that's 2/3 over there who are expressing a felt need for creches and family support of their kind. When it comes to institutionalized support, 1/4, that is 1 out of 4, said that institutionalized transport does not exist, but they would like it to exist, and 1/3 of them did not really need it. The situation about housing was very similar. And so these are the kinds of things that institutions have to generate. And when we talk about institutions having to generate them, who will generate them? You will generate them. You are the stakeholders. It is up to you to articulate a demand. After all, when an institution decides about whether it is going to set up a creche, institutionalized transport, or hostels or institutionalized housing, they are going to ask you. Please say yes. Please raise the demand yourself. These days, the Ministry of Science does provide support for those kinds of initiatives. Take the initiative. And when we talk about generally what is the atmosphere that was perceived among them, well, the Niti Aayog study said 90% of the women who were surveyed in this particular study said that they were either comfortable or very comfortable with their male colleagues and also with their female colleagues. When they were asked, were you given an equal opportunity for advancement, 3 out of 4 women, that 75%, said that the work environment was either fair or it was very fair. Only 13% said that it was unfair or very unfair. So that's 13% out of 1,000 who said that it was unfair, and 75% said it was very fair. When we talk about sexual harassment, yes, of course, there is sexual harassment in the workplace. Is it common? Well, 80% of these women said that it's either uncommon or very uncommon, and only 7% said that it's a problem. So when we talk about women in leadership positions in science, when we talk about women in job roles, we have to look at the kind of data that is available to us. We cannot simply internalize whatever the New York Times or Washington Post or Economist publishes, and if they publish it, ask them, where is the evidence? Is there any basis for what you are saying? Because remember, when you are asking those kinds of questions, you are forcing them to go back and cross-check their evidence. And it is important for you. Like I said, how does it matter what the New York Times publishes by? You are the important people. What is important is that it is Indians who don't ask these questions, that it is Indians who take it for granted that India is a bad country, it's unsafe for women. The issue was raised about women's representation in parliament. Yes, it's true. 14% women in India are members of parliament. But have you looked at women in local self-government, in urban local bodies, city mayors, women in Panchayati Raj institutions? In those institutions, 43% representatives, that is 1 out of 2 almost, are women. And the mandate is only 33%. That's the constitutionally constitutional requisite for women representation. So if the constitutional requirement is only 1/3 and still 43% women are sharing power, then obviously to my mind it would suggest that in India men are willing to share power with women. That's not an issue. So why are we putting ourselves down like this? Why do we have such low self-esteem? Why do we have such low self-opinion about ourselves? I don't know. Please ask yourself this question. I would say that Indians are their own worst enemies. Yes, of course, you can have women go anywhere. But for that, women will have to come out and assert that they do have self-worth, that they do have self-esteem. And incidentally, the National Family Health Survey, I would encourage all of you to go out and read it. It says that when men were asked about these questions, they had a much more positive opinion than did women did. So look at your male colleagues. Do they really look down upon you? I don't think so. I have been in service myself for 32 years, and I can assure you this is not an issue that I ever came across. It was my first posting. It was communal riots after the Babri Masjid. I was subdivisional magistrate. I had to order a firing. Not a single policeman, my colleague, ever questioned it when I said, "Bhai, fire, there's a mob over there." Nothing. It never came up. So if this is the case, then why do we take this propaganda seriously? Believe me, it is propaganda. For women to be there in good leadership positions in science, we must encourage more and more women who enroll for scientific careers, who take up jobs in science, to stay on the course, to not be deterred by the responsibilities of childbearing. And yes, one of the suggestions that Professor Ramakrishna made is an excellent suggestion. Please put it down on paper, anyone who's here, and send it to the ministry, that for married women, age of entry should be increased. And that is something which many European countries do, that they allow them to join jobs at a much later date. So we should look at affirmative action. We should look at building safe cities, a safe atmosphere, and a good, strong ecosystem where women can realize their potential. So these are the few points I had to make, and thank you for inviting me. If there's time, I think we can spend about 15 minutes for Q&A.
Yes, I'm sure we can spend. Yes, Veda, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Meena, for enlightening us. It was really so happy to know that actually we came up a long way, and the evidence-based supported points well articulated by you, because you really understand the grassroots level issues as you work on a very daily basis. And actually it is very like a new hope, or a new winds to all women who actually in this sector. Thank you once again. We have some questions in the chat box. Or in case if anybody wants to raise your hands and interact with Madam Meena, I think we can start with that. Yeah, so I will take the first question in the chat box, ma'am. So with your, yeah, I think the Professor Ramakrishnan want to ask. Sir, please.
Madam, thank you so much for pointing out that all the people around are not predators. I think that is the most important point, because while there are certain aberrants, there are people like any criminal, not a criminal. Likewise, not everybody predates on women. Most of the men are also very respectful and of the rights of women, of equality, and sensitive to all those respects. There are aberrations, and I think the best thing we have emphasis has to be on enforcement of those policies as per the law, and it should be done without exception. And thank you so much for pointing out that in spite of having such liberal and open policies and such good policies on women, our nation at times has been tarred by vested interests that stem from American or European sources. I agree with you so much, and thank you for pointing this out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Ramakrishna.
Thank you, sir. Now, may I request Shikha Goyal?
Hello. Hello. Is my voice audible?
Yes, Shikha, please.
Hello. Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning, ma'am. Hello. I think my voice is not audible. Is it audible?
No, it's audible, Shikha. Go ahead. Do you have a question?
Yeah. So, ma'am, very good morning. I just wanted to ask you that since you emphasized more on the increasing the age of women in science stream, STEM education or STEM employment, I would say that there are very few options, especially designed for women for entering into the mainstream of science. But the main thing is that there are WSP programs, but I find the salary they offer if I am a PT and if regularly apply for a postdoctorate, my salary is much high. But when I apply specifically to women categories, the salaries are very less. So why do they discriminate on this part? Like I can tell you 5-6 programs of women scientists, UGC women programs and other. They offer very less salary for PhDs, and if we apply to a regular course for the RAs, the salaries are very high. Why this discrimination?
So it's an important point you've raised, Shikha. I would need more information to comment on that point, but my understanding is that there are very few PhD scholars in India. Actually, if you look at the number of research scholars per population, we are very low. A country like the United Kingdom, which has about a small fraction of the Indian population, has 400 researchers per lakh, and I think we have maybe about 20 or 25. So we don't have enough people, but yes, this point that you make is disturbing. Please do write to the National Commission. If it is true, we'll take it up with the Department of Science and Technology.
Yeah, ma'am, I'm sure that it's like that because I know what's the exact salary of a RE in India, within country only. I'm not talking outside India. And if we apply to lateral entry schemes in women programs and other, the salaries are around if it is 55,000 for women through women entry schemes, it is around 80,000 for the regular if we go for the things.
So thank you for bringing this to my notice. We'll take it up.
And ma'am, secondly, I would wanted to bring it to your notice that there are very less number of crèche facilities in premier institutes of India also. I'm not talking about the state universities, but the very premier institutes of India. There are no crèche facilities, and if they are as per the market price of regular crèche. They are not institutional sponsors. If we want to enroll our student in that crèche, we have to pay a hefty amount for that per month.
Yeah,
so I think that should be institutionally sponsored for their students.
Yes, of course, it should be institutionally sponsored, but I think for that, more women who are working need to make that demand. and currently we don't have enough women who are making that demand, which is why I said all of you are stakeholders. Please articulate your voices and bring pressure to bear upon your management to take that decision.
I totally agree, but it takes time, ma'am.
Of course it takes time. All these social efforts take time, Shikha. Any other question?
Okay, thank you, sir. No, thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, Rajan, please, you have a question to discuss with ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Meeta ma'am, for showing us, a different and very positive path. I think we all are for it, and you told us so many right things, which we were, we were on the other part. So thank you so much. I think I just want to also address what Shikha just said, that at least to the best of our knowledge, these are not the case. For example, NPDF and the women scientist A, I think both have same fellowship. Maybe I'm not aware, but if that is the case...
No, sir, it's not like that. I am sure.
So NPDF is, I think, 55. Women scientist also 55. I'm not sure about UGC women researcher. But of course, we as INEAS also will look into those. And if these are the situations, I think we will also bring these to the notice of funding agencies.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Veda, I have a question. Can I ask?
Sure, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Very informative session. I have a question about the one of the government guideline about the like your PTOM about posting of husband and wife in the same station in the government services. But often we see generally this is not accepted in the institutions, like recruitment of couples in the same institute, or maybe in the same, not in the institute, at least in the station. It's not really actually practiced. It is taken more as a negative. So still, even though there are guidelines from the government to give the preference, what is your viewpoint on it or take on it, for the implementation of it?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So it is true that there are those government guidelines, but it was practically possible to implement those guidelines at a time when the numbers of women present in government service were very few in number. Today, the numbers of women in government service have increased by leaps and bounds. So it is not always practically possible. I remember I was CEO in Zilla Parishad 20 years ago, and almost 50% of the school staff, the teachers in education, they were females. So it became almost impossible to adjust the demand of everyone, because the demand they made was one demand, and that is that they wanted to be posted in their hometown. So see, then it becomes practically very, very difficult. I think a different kind of policy may be to look at having fewer and fewer jobs that are transferable. So in India, we have unfortunately encadred almost all positions and made everything a transferable job, but normally that should not be the case. But for that, we have to and make a demand of a different nature.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Arun, you want to interact with ma'am?
Yeah, thank you, ma'am, for a wonderful presentation and wonderful lecture and providing us so many ideas. Actually, it would be better to have so many male participants here so that their eye could open.
Good
but
point.
I feel that
more males are required. Involve men in the dialogue.
Actually, what happened that many things we are not, we think in our own perspective, and we are not getting the perspective of the women and other candidates, what they are suffering and what they are feeling. So that is better to have more male participants. First thing is that. Second thing is what I feel good for this platform is that the participation of policymakers like you, that is also required, because many times we think in our perspective but not in the perspective of the policymaker, and even we make the recommendation, then we are not able to make the policymaker to understand them. So this kind of things and initiatives are very, very good for the welfare of the women and society. And third thing is that it is always better to have, so many perspectives from so many different speakers and different persons. So thank you, INEAS, for organizing this events and inviting so many good and eminent speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arun. We have a lot of questions, but I think we will share with
please bring
Madam
it to
Meeta
an
because
end
of
now.
the
You can
yeah,
email me any
time.
questions that you have. Okay.
Sure. It was a pleasure hearing you, ma'am. Despite the busy schedule, you are with us for such a long time. Now, may I invite Dr. Nishant to thank Madam and also to conclude the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Veda. Wow, what an exhilarating talk. Thank you, ma'am, for your encouraging words about women empowerment and especially your very, very highly positive outlook. I think that was one thing which I would say like really, shook us today. Your emphasis on looking at positive things in life, which you supported ably with so much of statistics. Thank you so much for that. In fact, you very finely brought out the difference between the sex and gender itself. That was very nice. And the importance of support system, both family and institutional support system for any women in career was emphasized very aptly by you. And you also emphasized how this enabling ecosystem should be created for women, especially, to have a very good career in STEM. And the answers to the questions raised by the participants was also, very aptly put forward. So thank you once again for being part of this workshop, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Pleasure to meet you all. Bye-bye.
Yes, ma'am. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, ma'am.